Before they forced her to marry, the Apache girl begged. The cowboy lifted her onto his horse. The sun rose slowly over the red-streaked mountains, casting long shadows across the dusty town. In the small settlement nestled near the edge of the desert, life moved at its own steady pace. Horses neighed in the corral, the blacksmith hammered away at metal, and the wind carried the soft scent of sage and dry earth. Among the townsfolk, a young Apache girl named Ayana moved quietly through the streets, her small feet kicking up clouds of dust with each careful step. Her dark eyes held a mixture of fear and determination, and the townspeople watched her with curiosity and some measure of sympathy. Ayana was different from the other children in the town. She had grown up, understanding the strength of her people, the traditions that guided their lives, and the harshness of the land they called home. But unlike many of her peers, she was aware that a day was coming when her choices would no longer belong to her. Her family, respected members of the Apache community, had decided that she would marry a man she had never met, a union arranged entirely according to custom. While she respected her family, the thought of being bound in a life she had not chosen filled her with dread. The morning was quiet, almost too quiet, as Ayana sat by the edge of the river that ran near the town. The water reflected the pale sunlight, shimmering in gentle ripples across the surface. She could hear the distant sounds of life, the clatter of wagon wheels, the murmur of voices, and the faint calling of a hawk high above. But her mind was elsewhere. She thought of freedom, of places she had never been, and of a world beyond the boundaries of her village. The wind tousled her dark hair, and she pulled her shawl closer around her shoulders, as if the fabric itself could protect her from the storm of the day ahead. Her father, a tall man with broad shoulders and a serious expression, had been kind to her in his own quiet way. He had taught her to ride horses, to track animals through the desert, and to understand the signs of nature that spoke of life and survival. But now his eyes were clouded with worry. He knew the arrangement had to happen, that tradition demanded it, and yet he could see the fear in his daughter's eyes. His heart ached, but his voice was firm when he spoke to her. "Ayana," he said softly, "you must understand that this is our way. Our people have lived by these traditions for generations. I know it is hard, but your heart will find its strength. You will be a good wife, and our family will be honored." Ayana looked at him, tears threatening to spill. She loved her father, respected him, but she could not accept the idea of being taken from her world and placed into another she did not know. Her heart pounded in her chest as she imagined the ceremony, the strangers, the words she would be forced to speak. Every story she had heard about young girls leaving their families and never returning played in her mind like shadows. She wanted to scream, to run, but the town was small, and escape seemed impossible. It was then that she noticed a stranger in the distance. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, rode into town on a horse that seemed to move with a sense of purpose. He was not from the town, nor did he belong to any of the local families. His hat shaded his eyes, but there was a steady confidence in the way he carried himself. Jack, as he would later be known, had been traveling across the territory, seeking work, adventure, or perhaps just a place where the wind and the open sky could be his companions. But something about the tension in the town drew his attention, and his curiosity pulled him closer. From a distance, Jack could see the young girl sitting by the river, her small figure almost lost against the wide open landscape. He noticed the way she clutched her shawl, the fear in her stance, and the quiet desperation in her gaze. It was unusual to see such vulnerability in a land where survival demanded toughness. He slowed his horse and watched as she traced patterns in the sand with her fingers, her mind clearly elsewhere. Something inside him stirred, a mixture of concern, admiration, and a protective instinct he had not felt in a long time. As the morning wore on, Ayana returned home reluctantly, her feet dragging against the dusty road. The town was beginning to bustle with preparations for the marriage ceremony, which would take place in a matter of hours. Brightly colored fabrics were being hung. The smell of freshly baked bread filled the air, and the townspeople moved with excitement, speaking in hushed tones about the girl who would soon be wed. But Ayana felt none of the excitement. She felt trapped, a small bird caught in a cage it did not want to enter. Inside her home, the walls were adorned with woven blankets, symbols of her people's history, and small trinkets collected over generations. She could hear her mother moving quietly in the next room, preparing garments for the ceremony. Her mother's hands were steady, her movements calm, but there was a sadness in her eyes that Ayana recognized. She knew her mother understood her daughter's fear, yet she could do nothing to prevent what was to come. Ayana sat on the floor, knees drawn to her chest, and whispered a silent prayer. She prayed not just for herself, but for the courage to face the impossible. Her thoughts wandered to the stories her grandmother had told her, stories of brave women who had faced hardship with grace, who had found freedom even in the harshest conditions. Those tales gave her a spark of hope, a reminder that perhaps she could carve her own path, even when the world seemed determined to dictate it. Meanwhile, Jack had dismounted near the edge of town and tied his horse to a post. He walked cautiously toward the center, careful not to draw too much attention. He overheard fragments of conversation, the mention of the girl, the upcoming marriage, and the tension that hung like a heavy cloud over the town. His instincts told him that something was wrong, that someone needed help, though he could not yet understand the full story. When their paths finally crossed, Ayana looked up and saw Jack standing nearby. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. Here was a stranger, a man from another life entirely, yet there was a sense of understanding in his gaze. She did not know him, yet something in her heart whispered that perhaps he could offer the one thing she longed for more than anything else: freedom. Jack approached slowly, keeping his voice low and gentle. "Are you all right?" he asked. "You look worried." Ayana hesitated, unsure if she could trust him. She had learned caution from an early age, but there was something in his tone, a kindness that felt real, and she found herself nodding slightly. I have to leave," she whispered, barely audible. "But I cannot." Jack frowned, sensing the weight of her words. He could not fully understand her situation, but he could see the fear in her eyes, the desperation that would not allow her to stay. He wanted to help, though he did not yet know how. "Then maybe I can help," he said.
"But you have to trust me." Ayana's heart raced. Trust was not easily given, yet in that moment, she felt a small spark of hope.
Perhaps the day that had seemed so certain, so unchangeable, could be different. Perhaps the story she had always feared could take a new turn, one written by her own choices rather than the expectations of others. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and the town buzzed with preparations, unaware that a small act of courage and a chance meeting between two strangers was about to change everything. Ayana's life, once bound by duty and fear, teetered on the edge of possibility, and as she met Jack's steady gaze, a silent understanding passed between them. The day ahead would not be like any other, and the choices they made in the next few hours would shape the rest of their lives. The morning sun climbed higher, turning the dusty streets of the town a bright gold. The townspeople moved quickly, preparing for the marriage ceremony that would change Ayana's life forever. Tables were set up in the square, decorated with colorful cloths, and the aroma of fresh bread and roasting meat filled the air. Children ran between the houses, laughing, unaware of the worry and fear that weighed heavily on Ayana's young shoulders. Inside her home, Ayana's family prepared for the ceremony with practiced calm. Her mother dressed her in garments of soft fabric, weaving tiny beads into her dark hair. Ayana's hands trembled as she sat quietly, her heart pounding like a drum. She tried to focus on the small movements of her mother's fingers, the gentle touch of the fabric, anything that could anchor her in the moment. But the thought of the man she was expected to marry, a stranger, made her stomach churn. She had never seen him, never spoken to him, and yet she was supposed to give her entire life to someone she did not know. Her father entered the room, his expression serious but gentle. He knelt beside her and placed his hands on her shoulders. "Ayana," he said softly, "I know you are afraid, but our people have traditions that guide us. This is not easy, but it is the way things must be." Ayana looked down at her hands, clenching them into fists. "But father, I don't want this. I'm not ready. I don't know him. I don't want to leave everything I know behind." Her father's eyes softened, and for a moment he seemed almost like the man she knew as a protector rather than an enforcer of tradition. "I understand, my daughter," he said, "but sometimes life asks us to do things we do not understand. You must trust that you will find your strength." Ayana nodded, though it was a hollow gesture. She felt trapped, a bird in a cage made of expectation and duty. She wanted to run, to escape into the open land that stretched beyond the town where the mountains met the sky. But she knew the town was small, surrounded by rocky hills and dry plains. There was no easy path to freedom, and the thought made her heart ache. As the time for the ceremony approached, the streets filled with townspeople, all eager to witness the event. Ayana's anxiety grew with each passing moment. She could hear whispers about her beauty, her quiet strength, and the honor her family would gain from the marriage, but she did not feel honored. She felt fear, confusion, and a desperate desire to choose her own life. Meanwhile, Jack remained nearby, observing the activity from a distance. He had not approached Ayana after their first meeting, unsure how much he could do without causing trouble. But now, seeing the preparations and the tense expressions on her face, he realized the danger was real. The girl's fear was visible even from afar, and he could not ignore it. Something inside him demanded action, even if he did not yet know how he could help. Ayana moved toward the square, her steps slow and deliberate. Her heart raced with every footfall, and she felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon her. She could hear her mother calling words of encouragement, her father nodding in quiet reassurance, but the voices were distant, like echoes from another world. She wanted to turn and run, but the fear of disappointing her family held her in place. Jack watched her carefully. He could see the fear in her eyes, the way her body seemed to shrink under the attention. He knew that if she stayed, she would be forced into a life she did not want. He dismounted his horse quietly and moved closer, careful not to draw too much attention. The wind carried the sound of the people's voices, the laughter and chatter mixing with the beating of his own heart. As Ayana reached the center of the square, the ceremony began. An elder stepped forward, speaking in solemn tones about duty, family, and the importance of tradition. Ayana's hands clenched tighter, and she looked around for a way to escape. But the crowd was too thick, and her family watched with expectant eyes. Panic surged through her chest, and she felt tears welling up. Suddenly, she made a decision. She could not stay. She could not allow her life to be taken from her without a choice. With a quick glance at her parents, she bolted toward the edge of the town. Gasps rose from the crowd as she ran, the sound of her feet pounding against the hard ground echoing through the streets. Mothers shielded their children, men called after her, but she did not stop. Jack saw her movement and immediately understood what was happening. He ran to meet her, pushing through the crowd with long, determined strides. He reached her just as she stumbled over a rock near the edge of the town. "You have to come with me," he shouted, offering his hand. Ayana hesitated for a brief second, fear flashing in her eyes, but the desperation in her heart was stronger. She grabbed his hand and he helped her up. Without thinking, he guided her toward his horse, which was tied nearby. The townspeople shouted in confusion and alarm, but Jack did not pause. He lifted Ayana onto the horse with care, and she clung to him tightly, her body trembling. The horse's hooves kicked up clouds of dust as they began to move. Behind them, the crowd called out, but their voices became distant as the open land stretched before them. Ayana's heart raced as the wind whipped against her face. The mountains loomed ahead, their peaks sharp and untouchable, but the sense of freedom filled her with hope. She looked at Jack, whose face was set with determination. He did not speak much, but his presence was enough. She felt a sense of safety she had not known since childhood, a feeling that perhaps she could survive this impossible moment. The town quickly disappeared behind them as they rode across the plains. Jack guided the horse through narrow paths and rocky terrain, careful to avoid obstacles while keeping a steady pace. Ayana clung to him, her mind a whirlwind of fear, gratitude, and disbelief. She could hardly believe that she was finally leaving the life that had been forced upon her. Hours passed as they moved through the wilderness. The sun climbed higher, turning the plains into a dazzling landscape of gold and brown. The sound of the wind and the horse's steady rhythm became a kind of music, filling Ayana's heart with a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. She realized that she had taken the first step toward freedom, a step that would change her life forever. As the day wore on, they encountered small obstacles, rocks in the path, steep inclines, and the occasional branch that brushed against their faces. Each challenge reminded Ayana of the strength she had within her, and each moment with Jack reinforced the fact that she was not alone. He did not speak much, but his calm presence was enough to steady her nerves and give her courage. By the time the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, they had reached the edge of a wide canyon. Ayana looked down at the valley below, the landscape stretching endlessly before her. For the first time in her life, she felt truly free. She had escaped the path that had been chosen for her, and though the future was uncertain, she knew that she had the power to decide what came next. Jack slowed the horse as they reached a safe spot, letting it drink from a small stream. He glanced at Ayana, whose eyes shone with a mixture of exhaustion and relief. "You're safe now," he said gently. "No one can force you to go back." Ayana nodded, tears streaming down her face. She had never felt such a mix of fear and relief, but she also felt a spark of hope. The journey was far from over, but she had taken the first step. She had found someone who believed in her courage, and together they had created a chance for a new life. As the sky darkened and stars began to appear, Ayana realized that she was no longer the same girl who had sat by the river that morning. She had faced fear, made a brave choice, and discovered that freedom was within her reach. And as she looked at Jack, she understood that she had found more than just safety. She had found a companion willing to stand by her side in the uncertain journey ahead. The canyon stretched out before them like a painting, the shadows of cliffs casting long shapes across the valley. The air was cooler here, carrying the faint scent of pine and damp earth. Ayana's heart still raced from their escape, and though she felt a deep sense of relief, she knew that they were not yet truly safe. The town, the people who had wanted to force her marriage, could not be far behind. Every sound, every distant movement made her glance over her shoulder, Fearful that the chase would continue, Jack noticed her tension and spoke gently, trying to reassure her. "We need to keep moving," he said, "but we have some time before anyone can catch up. You're safe with me." His voice was calm, steady, and full of quiet strength. Ayana clung to that reassurance, feeling the tension in her muscles ease slightly as they rode along a narrow path that wound through the canyon. The path was rocky and uneven, forcing them to move slowly and carefully. Jack guided the horse with skill, leaning over slightly to steady Ayana when the ground jostled beneath them. "You're doing well," he said, as if reading her mind. "I know this is scary, but you're stronger than you think." Ayana nodded, feeling a small spark of courage light within her. She had always been told she was strong, but she had never realized just how true it could be, until now. As they rode deeper into the canyon, the wind carried strange sounds, rustling leaves, distant cries of birds, and the occasional snap of a branch under some hidden animal's feet. Every sound made Ayana's heart leap, but Jack remained calm, whispering instructions when necessary and keeping their pace steady. He knew the terrain well enough to lead them through areas where they could hide if needed, moving from one rocky outcrop to the next with careful precision. Hours passed as they journeyed through the canyon, and the sun climbed high into the sky. Ayana's muscles began to ache, and her hands were sore from holding tightly to Jack and the horse. Yet even in the exhaustion, she felt a sense of freedom she had never known before. She could choose her own path now, and for the first time in her life, she felt that the world might belong to her as much as it belonged to anyone else. Jack occasionally glanced at her, noticing her exhaustion. "We should rest soon," he said, pointing to a flat ledge nearby. They dismounted, and Ayana felt the soft earth beneath her feet, the strange relief of standing again after hours on horseback. The horse grazed quietly nearby, and Jack produced a small bundle of bread and water he had brought with him. "You need to eat," he said simply, handing her a piece of bread. Ayana hesitated, then took it. She ate slowly, savoring the simple taste, realizing that it had been many hours since she had last eaten properly. Jack watched her quietly, not pressuring her, just being present. That silent support gave her a small measure of comfort, something she had not felt since leaving her home. After a short rest, they continued their journey. The canyon walls grew taller and steeper, the paths narrower, forcing them to move with even greater care. Ayana's mind wandered as they traveled, thinking about the life she had left behind. She remembered her mother's soft hands, her father's serious eyes, and the friends she had played with in the town. She knew she could never go back to that life, but the memories made her realize how much she had taken for granted. As the afternoon sun began to lower in the sky, casting orange and pink light across the canyon, Ayana suddenly spotted movement in the distance. She squinted, her heart jumping. "Jack, over there," she whispered. A group of riders appeared on the horizon, moving quickly in their direction. The people from her town had not given up. They were coming after her. Jack's expression hardened, and he guided the horse behind a cluster of rocks, using the shadows for cover. "We need to be careful," he said quietly. "They've seen us. We have to hide until it's safe to move again." Ayana's hands tightened on his arms as they crouched behind the rocks, peering through the gaps to watch the riders approach. Her heart pounded, but she trusted Jack completely, knowing that he would do everything he could to keep her safe. The riders slowed as they reached the area where Ayana had been seen last. They called out, but their voices echoed against the canyon walls, giving away their positions. Jack whispered to Ayana, "Stay down, stay quiet. Don't make a sound." She nodded, holding her breath as the strangers searched the area, unaware that she and Jack were hidden nearby. Minutes passed like hours. Ayana's mind raced, imagining what would happen if they were discovered. But Jack remained calm, whispering encouragement when she began to panic. "Breathe," he said softly.
"We're going to get through this. You're stronger than they think, and I'm right here with you."
His confidence steadied her, giving her courage to remain still and patient. Finally, the riders, frustrated by their inability to find Ayana, began to move on. Ayana exhaled slowly, relief flooding her body. She looked at Jack with gratitude, her eyes shining. "Thank you," she whispered. I don't know what I would have done without you." Jack shook his head. "You did this yourself. You ran. You were brave. I just helped make sure no one stopped you." His words gave her a sense of pride she had never felt before. She realized that her courage had brought them this far, and that bravery could carry her through even the most difficult moments. As the sun dipped lower, painting the canyon walls in shades of red and gold, Jack led Ayana to a small, hidden cave he had spotted earlier. It was a safe place for the night, tucked away from the path of any pursuers. They dismounted, letting the horse rest, and settled near the entrance. Ayana's body ached from the long ride, but the sense of safety allowed her to relax slightly. Jack built a small fire, careful not to make it too bright, and they shared a simple meal of bread and water. Ayana felt a warmth she had not known since leaving her home, not just from the fire, but from the comfort of being with someone she could trust. She realized that in this stranger she had found more than protection. She had found a companion who believed in her strength and her right to choose her own path. As night fell, the stars appeared in the sky, twinkling like distant fires. Ayana looked up, feeling a sense of wonder she had never experienced in her small town. The world was vast, filled with possibilities, and for the first time she felt that she could truly live her own life. Jack watched her quietly, understanding the depth of her thoughts without her needing to speak. The night was calm, but both of them knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges. The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with obstacles they could not yet see, but for now they rested, drawing strength from each other and from the small victory of escaping the life that had been forced upon Ayana. Ayana lay down on a bed of soft grass and blankets Jack had prepared, her mind replaying the events of the day. She remembered the fear, the panic, and the exhilaration of running through the town, and she realized that she had taken the first step toward freedom. The courage she had shown gave her hope for the days to come, and she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them with the same determination. Jack, sitting nearby, kept watch over the entrance to the cave, his eyes scanning the shadows for any signs of danger. He knew the journey was far from over, but he felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that he had helped Ayana take control of her life. He admired her courage, her strength, and her spirit, and he silently vowed to help her however he could until she was truly safe. The night grew darker, and the canyon became a world of shadow and stars. Ayana finally closed her eyes, allowing herself to rest, her body tired but her spirit strengthened. She had faced fear, taken action, and discovered a sense of freedom she had never known. And as she drifted into sleep, she knew that the turning point of her journey had arrived, the moment when she took her life into her own hands and refused to let others dictate her future. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now she was free, and that freedom was worth every step, every risk, and every moment of fear. And as she slept, Jack remained vigilant, a silent guardian knowing that the road ahead would test them both, but confident that together they could face whatever came next. The morning sun rose slowly over the canyon, casting long golden shadows across the rocks and cliffs. Ayana awoke with a start, her heart still racing from the memories of the previous day. The cave where she and Jack had spent the night was small but safe, tucked away behind a thick cluster of boulders. Yet even with the shelter, she could not shake the sense of urgency that had taken hold of her. Freedom was not yet fully hers, and she knew that the journey ahead would test her courage like never before. Jack stirred nearby, his eyes already scanning the canyon entrance. He had slept lightly, alert to any movement that might signal danger. When he saw Ayana stirring, he offered a small, reassuring smile. "We need to move quickly today," he said softly. "The longer we stay, the more likely it is they'll find us. I have a path in mind, one that will take us far from the town and into safer territory." Ayana nodded, still half asleep, but determined. She trusted Jack completely. His calm confidence gave her strength. Slowly, they packed their few belongings, careful not to make a sound. The horse, fed and watered, waited patiently nearby, ready to carry them through the canyon. Every movement was deliberate, every step cautious, as if the rocks themselves might betray them to anyone who was looking. As they set off, the canyon seemed alive with danger. Birds took flight at their approach, and small animals scurried into hidden crevices. Ayana's hands gripped Jack tightly as they rode, her mind racing with thoughts of what could happen if they were caught. The previous day's escape had given her hope, but hope alone would not protect them now. They needed speed, strategy, and luck. The path narrowed as they moved deeper into the canyon, forcing the horse to pick its way carefully over loose stones and uneven ground. Ayana held her breath with each step, feeling the tension in her body grow. Jack's hands were steady on the reins, guiding them with skill born of experience. He spoke little, letting the silence of the canyon surround them, broken only by the sound of the horse's hooves and the occasional whisper of the wind. Suddenly a loud shout echoed through the rocks, sharp and urgent. Ayana froze, her heart leaping into her throat. "They've found us," she whispered, fear rising in her chest. Jack did not respond with words, but his eyes darkened with determination. He pulled the horse behind a rocky outcrop, using the shadows to conceal their presence. From the ridge above, several riders appeared, moving quickly and deliberately. Their horses' hooves clattered against the rocks, sending small pebbles tumbling down. Ayana's pulse raced as she realized how close the danger had come. She had never imagined a moment more frightening than being forced into the marriage. But now, the threat of capture was immediate and real. Jack leaned close, his voice low and steady. "Stay calm," he said. "We can get through this. Follow my lead, and don't make a sound." Ayana nodded, her hands trembling but her mind focused. She had already faced fear before, and now she knew she could survive it again. The riders began scanning the area, shouting to one another and pointing in their search. Ayana's eyes darted around, looking for any possible escape route. She noticed a narrow crevice in the rocks nearby, just wide enough for them and the horse to slip through. Jack caught her gaze and nodded, understanding her thought before she even spoke. With careful precision, he guided the horse toward the crevice, moving slowly at first, then faster as the riders drew closer. Ayana held on tightly, her body pressed against his back, feeling both the fear and the exhilaration of the moment. The horse moved with skill and grace, navigating the treacherous terrain with Jack's steady guidance. They slipped through the crevice just as one of the riders shouted in alarm, realizing their quarry was disappearing. Ayana's heart pounded in her chest. but relief flooded her when she saw that they were out of immediate reach. She allowed herself a brief moment to breathe, knowing that the danger was not fully gone, but that they had gained a small victory. For hours they moved through the canyon, the path winding and difficult. Jack led them along hidden trails and rocky slopes, always aware of the need to remain unseen. Ayana's muscles ached, and her hands were raw from holding on, but she felt a growing sense of determination. She had survived the first day. She could survive the second. And more than that, she was no longer just running. She was choosing her path. As the afternoon sun began to lower, they reached a wide plateau overlooking a valley. The view was breathtaking, with rivers winding through green patches and distant mountains rising in the horizon. But there was no time to admire it. From the far side of the plateau, Ayana spotted movement. More riders, likely sent from the town, searching for her with fresh urgency. The sense of danger returned, stronger than ever. Jack quickly assessed the terrain. "We need to move down into the valley," he said. "There's a river there that will hide our trail. If we can reach it before they do, we can lose them completely." Ayana nodded, fear and determination mingling in her chest. She had never imagined riding through such treacherous land, yet with Jack guiding the way, she felt a strange confidence. The horse descended carefully, its hooves slipping over loose stones, and Ayana held her breath with every step. The cliffside was steep, and one wrong move could have been disastrous. Halfway down, a rock gave way beneath the horse's hooves, and Ayana gasped. Jack leaned forward, steadying the animal and urging it onward. "Almost there," he said, his voice calm but urgent. "Just a little further." The horse scrambled carefully, and finally they reached the valley floor safely. Ayana's legs shook from the tension, but relief washed over her. They rode along the river, the water cutting a path through the valley. Jack led them through shallow streams, careful to hide their tracks as best he could. Ayana's heart gradually slowed, and she began to feel the exhilaration of escape, the thrill of taking control of her life. For the first time, she truly understood what freedom could feel like, not just in imagination, but in reality. But the danger was not fully behind them. From a distance, they could see the riders pursuing, determined and relentless. Jack whispered, "We can't stop now. Keep holding on." Ayana tightened her grip, the horse's steady rhythm beneath her giving her a strange sense of security. She realized that every step forward was a step toward her own life, a life of her choosing. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and purple, they found a hidden grove along the river. Jack guided the horse into a cluster of trees, their thick branches providing cover. They dismounted, letting the horse rest, and crouched low to watch the approaching riders. Ayana's heart pounded, but she felt a sense of calm she had never known before. She had faced the impossible, and she had survived. The riders passed by the grove, unable to find them. Ayana exhaled, her body trembling with relief. She looked at Jack, whose face showed exhaustion but also satisfaction.
"We did it," she whispered.
"We're safe for now." Jack nodded, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "This is just the beginning," he said. "Tomorrow will bring more challenges. But tonight, you've earned rest. You've been brave beyond measure. Ayana, I've never seen anyone face fear the way you have." Ayana felt tears prick her eyes. She had faced danger, the weight of tradition, and the uncertainty of escape. Yet in all of it, she had found courage she did not know she possessed. And as she looked at Jack, she realized that she had also found someone who believed in her, who would stand by her side through the trials ahead. They settled near the river, the soft sounds of water flowing providing a gentle lullaby. Ayana leaned against Jack, feeling the warmth of trust and companionship. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to relax fully, knowing that the most dangerous part of the journey, the chase through the canyon, was behind them. As night fell and the stars emerged, Ayana reflected on the day's events. She had faced fear head-on, taken risks, and survived. She had made choices that no one else could make for her, and she had discovered that her own courage was stronger than she had ever imagined. Jack remained watchful, knowing that danger could return at any moment, but also understanding the strength that Ayana now carried within her. Together they had faced the climax of their flight, the moment when fear, courage, and determination collided, and emerged stronger for it. The night was calm, but both of them knew that the journey was far from over. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, and new decisions. Yet Ayana felt a quiet confidence, knowing that whatever came, she would face it with the same bravery that had carried her through the canyon and into the valley below. And as she closed her eyes to sleep, Ayana understood that she was no longer the same girl who had feared the arranged marriage. She had become someone who could shape her own life, someone who could face danger and survive, someone who could choose her own path. And with Jack by her side, she knew that the rest of her journey, though uncertain, would be a journey she could face with courage, hope, and determination. The first light of morning seeped through the trees, casting soft golden rays across the river and valley. Ayana stirred from a restless sleep, the sounds of water and birdsong filling the air. She felt the ache in her muscles from the long journey, but it was a welcome reminder of how far she had come. For the first time since the morning of her arranged marriage, she felt a sense of calm, a quiet hope that maybe, finally, she could be free. Jack was already awake, sitting quietly near the river, keeping watch. When he saw her moving, he smiled, a small but steady reassurance. "Ready to keep going?" he asked. Ayana nodded, gripping the small bundle they had carried with them, her eyes reflecting both exhaustion and determination. The night had been safe, but they still had a long way to go before she could truly feel secure. They mounted the horse and rode along the river, careful to stay hidden from anyone who might still be searching for her. The terrain was rugged but manageable, with soft soil along the riverbank making travel easier. Ayana began to notice the beauty of the valley, the lush green contrasting with the dry canyon they had escaped the day before. Birds flitted through the trees and the sunlight shimmered off the water, giving her a sense of peace she had never known before. As they rode, Ayana spoke softly. "I can't believe we made it this far," she said. I thought I would never escape."
I was so afraid. Jack glanced at her, his face calm but serious.
"You were brave," he said. "I just helped guide you." "You made the choices that mattered. You ran, you held on, and you didn't give up. That's what got us this far." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not of fear. They were of relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Jack shook his head, his gaze firm.
"No, you don't owe me anything."
"You did this yourself. I just made sure no one stopped you." The morning passed slowly as they moved further from the canyon and closer to the open plains beyond the valley. Ayana's body ached, but her spirit felt lighter with each step. She began to feel that freedom was not just a dream, it was real, and it was hers to claim. She could see the horizon stretching endlessly ahead, filled with possibilities she had never imagined. By midday, they reached a small forest at the edge of the plains. Jack guided them into the trees, creating a natural barrier between them and the open land. "We'll rest here for a while," he said. "The forest will hide our trail, and we can plan our next steps." Ayana dismounted, letting the horse graze while she stretched her legs. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of pine and earth, and felt a calm she had never known. For the first time, she realized that she could make her own choices, choices that belonged entirely to her, not to tradition or expectation. As they rested, Jack produced a small map from his pack. "We have a few options," he said. "We can follow the river east, where the land is open but easier to navigate, or we can take a longer path through the hills and forests, which will give us more cover." Ayana studied the map, her mind sharp despite her exhaustion. "The forest," she said finally. "It's safer. I don't want anyone finding us before we reach somewhere permanent." Jack nodded. "Agreed. It will take longer, but safety comes first." They traveled through the forest for hours, moving cautiously but steadily. Ayana began to notice the small details around her, the way sunlight filtered through the leaves, the sound of a distant waterfall, the rustle of small animals in the underbrush. For the first time in days, she could appreciate the beauty of the world around her, without fear pressing on her chest. As evening approached, they reached a small clearing with a gentle stream running through it. Jack guided the horse to the water to drink, and Ayana knelt to sip, feeling the cool liquid soothe her parched throat. They settled near the stream, and Jack gathered small branches to build a fire. As they ate a simple meal of bread and dried fruit, Ayana spoke softly. "I never thought I would feel free," she said. "I thought my life was already decided, but now I feel like I can choose. I can live my life on my own terms." Jack smiled, his eyes warm. "You can. And you will. This is just the beginning, Ayana. The world is yours now." Night fell, and the stars appeared twinkling brightly over the clearing. Ayana leaned against Jack, her body tired but her mind alive with possibilities. She thought of the life she had left behind, of the family who had loved her but also bound her by tradition. She knew she would never forget them, but she also understood that she had a right to live freely, to follow her own heart. As the fire crackled softly, Jack spoke again. "Tomorrow we'll keep moving," he said. "We'll find a place where you can be safe, a place where no one can force you to live a life you don't want." Ayana nodded, feeling a sense of hope that grew stronger with each word. She had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty, and she had survived. She had made choices that no one else could make for her, and she had discovered a strength within herself that she had never known. The next morning they continued their journey, moving steadily through the forest and into open land. The horse carried them tirelessly, and Ayana's confidence grew with each step. She felt a sense of connection to the land around her, as if the world itself were welcoming her into a life she could shape for herself. By midday they reached a small village, nestled at the edge of a river. Jack guided them carefully, ensuring they were not noticed by anyone who might be searching for Ayana. The villagers were kind and welcoming, offering water and food without question. Ayana felt a sense of relief wash over her. This place, she realized, could be the beginning of a new life. Jack and Ayana found a quiet spot near the river where they could rest safely. Ayana looked out over the water, feeling a profound sense of peace. I think I can start over here," she said softly. "I can learn, I can work, and I can live the way I choose." Jack nodded, a small smile on his face. "And I'll help you however I can. You've earned the right to live freely, and I'll make sure no one takes that away from you." Over the next few days, Ayana began to settle into the village. She learned the ways of the people there, helping with small chores and slowly gaining the skills she would need to live independently. Each day her confidence grew. and she began to feel a sense of belonging she had never known in her own town. She was no longer a girl running from tradition. She was a young woman building her own life. Jack remained by her side, offering guidance and protection when needed, but also giving her the space to grow. Ayanna realized that she had learned more than just survival skills. She had learned the value of courage, trust, and the importance of making her own choices. One evening, as the sun set over the river, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Ayanna stood on a small hill overlooking the village. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey she had taken, for the challenges she had faced, and for the freedom she had earned. She knew that life would not always be easy, but she also knew that she had the strength to face whatever came next. Jack stood beside her, silent but supportive, understanding the depth of her thoughts without her needing to speak. "You've come a long way," he said quietly. "You should be proud of yourself," Ayanna smiled, tears of joy filling her eyes. "I am," she said, "and I'll continue to be. This is just the beginning." As night fell and the stars filled the sky, Ayanna felt a sense of completion. She had faced fear, overcome obstacles, and discovered her own strength. She had escaped a life she had not chosen and found a place where she could live freely, make her own decisions, and follow her own heart. For the first time in her life, she felt truly alive. She had taken control of her destiny, and nothing could take that away from her. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had led her to freedom, safety, and hope. And as she looked at Jack, she knew that she had also found a companion who would stand by her side through whatever came next, someone who had helped her discover the power she had always carried within herself. Ayanna took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air fill her lungs, and smiled. She was no longer a girl bound by fear or tradition. She was a young woman free to choose her own path. And with that freedom came a future full of possibilities, adventure, and the promise of a life she could finally call her own.